So the question as posed is, how do you find the minor pentatonic scale using the circle of fifths? And I think people are right to say that you don't have to. It's certainly possible to find pentatonic scales by getting a major scale and then just deleting the relevant notes. That's totally possible. But you can use the circle of fifths to understand pentatonic scales as well. And actually, I think understanding how to do that gives you a deeper appreciation for how the circle of fifths is built and the relationship between the pentatonic scales and the regular major-minor diatonic scales. Let's start by talking about how the circle of fifths itself is constructed and a little bit about why it works. So you're probably familiar with the circle of fifths as looking something like this, and if you want to know the key signature for a particular scale, let's say C major, all you have to do is find the scale and see what the key signature is at that point in the circle of fifths. That's sort of the traditional understanding of what the circle of fifths does. But notice that you can also use the arrangement of the keys on the circle of fifths to figure out the notes that go into a particular scale. What you do is you pick whatever note you want to be your tonic, let's say G. So I'm going to try to find the G major scale. All I have to do that is to read out a continuous arc from the circle of fifths. So if I pick the note G itself, one thing counterclockwise, and then 5 more notes clockwise from G, that gives me all the notes of the G major scale. I've got G right here, A, B, C, D, E, and F sharp. And that basic logic works for whatever major scale you want to construct. Let's do it, for, let's say, A flat. So I'm going to build A flat major. All I have to do is I take one note counterclockwise and then 5 notes, clockwise. Again, that gives me A flat, B flat, C, D flat, E flat, F, and G. The fact that major scales are built in this way is exactly why the whole circle of fifths is useful for showing key signatures in the first place. So what about minor scales, you ask? Well, I think here it's helpful to think in terms of relative major versus minor. And let's start with C major. So I'll pick the note C, I'll pick one note counterclockwise, and then 5 notes clockwise. You can see I've picked the 7 natural notes out of this circle of fifths. Now, C major and A minor, the 2 relative keys, have the same set of notes. They just differ in terms of which note they treat as the tonic, or the main note of the scale. So I'll highlight A in blue instead of C, but I've still selected the same 7 notes. So you can think of actually all of the diatonic modes as just choosing to highlight in blue a different note from whatever arc on the circle of fifths you chose to highlight. Now, to move on to thinking about pentatonic scales, all you really need to do is you need to understand that a pentatonic scale, a major pentatonic scale. So let's go back to thinking about C major. And the way that I get the C major pentatonic scale from C diatonic major is I delete the 2 endpoints of this arc on the circle of fifths. So from C major, I snip off F and I snip off B. And you can see now I end up with C, D, E, G, A. Now I've got the complete C major pentatonic scale. And this works because the 2 notes that we snip off at the ends of this arc, F and B, form the tritone within the C major scale. So when people tell you to build a major scale and then delete the tritone within it, they're doing exactly the same thing, only they aren't using the circle of fifths as a handy visual guide. Now, A minor pentatonic relates to C major pentatonic in exactly the same way that A minor relates to C major as diatonic scales. I do exactly the same thing. I start with this collection of notes, A minor, and I snip off the tritone, delete the B, delete the F. And now I have my complete A minor pentatonic. So one way to think about building pentatonic scales is to build major pentatonic. You start with your tonic, and then you add on 4 extra notes clockwise. To build minor pentatonic, you start with your tonic, add 1 note clockwise and 3 notes counterclockwise. So let's try doing this for some different minor pentatonic scale. Let's do B minor pentatonic. So B minor has a tonic of B. I need 1 note clockwise and then 3 notes counterclockwise. You can see that gives me B, D, E, F sharp, A, and that is, in fact, exactly the notes that go into B minor pentatonic. Notice one thing that this means is there actually exist multiple copies of the pentatonic scale within a single major scale. So, for example, if I go back to C major, those are my notes in C major. A pentatonic scale is just a chunk of the circle of fifths that's 3 notes long. So if I highlight this in, let's say, darker blue, right, the major scale is 7 notes long, but a pentatonic scale is going to be 5. So I believe that's a chunk of 5 notes. Oops. Yeah, that's a chunk of 5 notes, including E. And then this is a chunk of 5 notes. So what this tells me is that the C major scale includes F pentatonic, C pentatonic, and G pentatonic. Or alternatively, A minor pentatonic, D minor pentatonic, and E minor pentatonic. This is exactly the reason that pentatonic scales fit into diatonic scales. They're built the same way, they just include a shorter chain of notes. And really, that's the trick for visualizing all these sorts of scales on the circle of fifths. You just figure out how many notes you need in the scale, 5 or 7, and then take out an equivalent length from the circle, and you're good. Then finally, you choose which relative mode of the collection of notes you have, based on learning where the tonic sits within the mode. So for example, again, if I were just to pick off these 7 notes, I learned that if I pick the first note as tonic, that gives me F Lydian. Second note gives me C Ionian. Third note gives me G Mixolydian, D Dorian, A Aeolian, E Phrygian, B Locrian. Same sort of thing works for the pentatonic modes. So for example, if I build the F major pentatonic, I don't know what we would call all of these. Certainly this is F major pentatonic if I treat that as tonic. But I also have, with the same 5 notes, D minor pentatonic. I don't know what you would call the rest of these, but it would be something similar. And that's pretty much it. Let me know if you have any questions.